The aroma of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee usually filled their small kitchen with a comforting warmth. But this morning, a subtle chill lingered in the air. Michael, a single dad with kind eyes and a perpetually worried crease between his brows, flipped a pancake with practiced ease. His daughter, Lily, a bright-eyed 7-year-old with a cascade of dark curls, sat at the breakfast bar, pushing a piece of toast around her plate with a distracted finger. "Eat up, sweet pea," Michael encouraged, placing a perfectly golden pancake in front of her. "Big day at school. Mrs. Evans says you're going to learn about space today." Lily merely nodded, her gaze fixed on something unseen outside the window. Michael sensed her withdrawal, a familiar pattern that had started subtly a few weeks ago. He tried to keep things light, to inject his usual morning enthusiasm into the quiet room, but Lily's silence was a heavy blanket. He poured himself a mug of coffee, the steam warming his face, and sat beside her. "Something on your mind, kiddo?" he asked gently, ruffling her hair. Lily finally looked at him, her large, expressive eyes clouded with a question that, when it came, struck Michael with the force of a physical blow. "Daddy," she began, her voice small and hesitant, "why don't I have a real dad like Sarah does?" The pancake in Michael's hand almost slipped. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "What do you mean, sweet pea?" he managed, trying to keep his tone even, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "I'm your real dad." Lily shook her head, a stubborn set to her jaw that reminded him so much of someone else. "No," she insisted, her voice gaining a surprising firmness. "A different real dad. The one my friend Sarah talks about. She says she has a daddy and a mommy, and her daddy isn't just her daddy. He's her real daddy. Like the one who helped make her." A pang of old pain, sharp and unwelcome, pierced through Michael. It was a secret he had guarded fiercely for years, a shield he had built around Lily to protect her from a past he deemed too complex, too painful. He had believed he was doing the right thing, shielding her from the harsh realities of her origins. But now, it seemed, the shield was cracking. He tried to brush it off, gently, to reassure her. "Honey, every daddy is a real daddy. I'm your daddy, and I love you more than anything in the world. That makes me your real daddy, always." Lily, however, was not easily swayed. She looked at him with an innocent yet probing gaze that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed facade. "But Sarah says her real daddy is special, and I don't have one like that." Her bottom lip quivered slightly, and Michael's heart ached. He wanted to scoop her up, to tell her everything, but the words caught in his throat, tangled with fear and old wounds. Later that day, the fluorescent lights of his small accounting office seemed to hum with an oppressive weight. Michael sat hunched over a spreadsheet, numbers blurring before his eyes. The morning's conversation with Lily replayed in his mind, each word a fresh sting. He had managed to divert her attention eventually, promising a trip to the park after school, but her question lingered, a persistent echo. His phone buzzed, startling him. It was the school. Mrs. Evans, Lily's first-grade teacher. Michael's stomach tightened. He answered, his voice a little too strained. "Mr. Davies, it's Mrs. Evans." Her voice was warm, but laced with a discernible concern. "I wanted to talk to you about Lily. She's been a little withdrawn in class lately, and, well, she's been asking about her real dad quite a lot." Michael's grip on the phone tightened. He knew it. This wasn't just a fleeting childhood curiosity. "Oh," he said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Yes, she mentioned something this morning. Just curious, you know how kids are." Mrs. Evans paused, and Michael could almost hear her sigh through the phone. "I understand, Mr. Davies, but it seems to be more than just curiosity. Last night, for instance, during our sharing circle, she was really upset. She brought her teddy bear, Barnaby, and she told us, and I quote, 'Sir, he's been asking for his real dad every night.' She then went on to explain how Barnaby missed his real dad and wanted to know where he was." Michael froze. The teacher's words, "Sir, he's been asking for his real dad every night," echoed in his mind, amplified, distorted, like a siren. It wasn't just Barnaby, it was Lily. She was projecting her own deep-seated feelings onto her beloved teddy bear. This was a bigger issue than he had ever imagined. The casual question at breakfast was merely the tip of an iceberg he had unknowingly allowed to grow beneath the surface of their lives. He felt a cold dread spread through him. The secret, the one he had so diligently kept hidden, was clearly hurting Lily. It was manifesting in her, causing her distress and confusion. He had tried to protect her, but in doing so, he had inadvertently created a void, a question mark in her young life that she was now desperate to fill. He mumbled something to Mrs. Evans about looking into it, promising to talk to Lily. As he hung up, the weight of his past crashed down on him. He had to confront something, not just for Lily's sake, but for his own. The carefully constructed peace he had built around their lives was crumbling, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he would have to face the ghosts he had tried so hard to bury. The time for secrets was over. The weight of Mrs. Evans's words pressed down on Michael, a suffocating blanket of responsibility and regret. "Sir, he's been asking for his real dad every night." The phrase replayed in his mind, a constant damning refrain. He knew then that the past he had so carefully walled off was no longer confined to the dusty corners of his memory. It was actively shaping Lily's present, coloring her innocent questions with an unspoken longing. He had to confront it, not just for Lily, but for the ghost of a love lost, and for the man he once was. His thoughts drifted back, years dissolving like mist, to a different life, a different city. He was in his early 20s then, a bright, ambitious young man from a working-class background, transplanted to the bustling, competitive world of London University. He had arrived with little more than a keen mind, an insatiable curiosity, and a burning desire to make something of himself, to rise above the humble circumstances of his upbringing. It was at a university event, a rather dry economics lecture he was reluctantly attending, that he first saw her. Sarah. She was radiant, even in the dim lecture hall, her intelligence sparkling in her eyes, her confidence a magnetic force. Their connection was immediate, an electric current passing between them that transcended their vastly different worlds. They fell deeply, irrevocably in love. Sarah, he soon discovered, came from a world of unimaginable privilege. Her father, Robert Sterling, was a name synonymous with power and wealth in London, a real estate billionaire whose empire stretched across continents. Robert Sterling, however, did not share his daughter's enthusiasm for Michael. From their very first meeting, the billionaire's disapproval was palpable, a chilling frost that seeped into every interaction. He saw Michael as beneath Sarah, a commoner, an opportunist, a gold digger seeking to leverage his daughter's status. No matter how Michael tried to prove himself, how he worked tirelessly on his studies, how he demonstrated his genuine love and dedication to Sarah, Robert Sterling remained impervious, his gaze always cold, his words always dismissive. Sarah, caught in the cross-currents of her love for Michael and the formidable influence of her father, found herself in an impossible position. She adored Michael, but a lifetime of conditioning, coupled with a deep-seated fear of her father's wrath, held her captive. For a while, they continued their relationship in secret, stealing moments of joy and intimacy amidst the ever-present threat of discovery. Their stolen glances, hushed conversations, and clandestine dates became the fabric of their young love, each moment precious, each encounter imbued with a desperate intensity. But secrets, especially those involving a man as powerful and resourceful as Robert Sterling, rarely remain hidden for long. Eventually, he found out. The confrontation was brutal, swift, and utterly devastating. Robert Sterling cornered Michael, his voice a low, dangerous growl, his eyes glinting with menace. He offered Michael a substantial sum of money, a life-changing amount for a young man of his background, to simply disappear, to vanish from Sarah's life forever. Michael, though stunned, refused outright. His love for Sarah was not for sale, he declared, his voice trembling but firm, his resolve unwavering. Robert Sterling's response was chilling. He didn't raise his voice, but the threats that followed were far more terrifying than any shout. He threatened Michael's family, his parents, his siblings, hinting at ways he could make their lives miserable. He threatened Michael's future career, promising to blacklist him from every reputable firm in the country. And most cruelly, he threatened Sarah's reputation, her future, her very happiness, if Michael didn't comply. He made it abundantly clear that he possessed the power to ruin Michael, to crush every aspiration he held dear, and to make Sarah's life a living hell. The pressure on Sarah became unbearable. Torn between her profound love for Michael and the terrifying weight of her father's threats, she eventually buckled. The breakup was agonizing. She came to Michael, her eyes swollen with tears, her body racked with sobs, her voice a raw whisper, as she told him it was for the best, that she couldn't defy her father any longer. She was clearly heartbroken, shattered by the decision, but she felt trapped, caught in a gilded cage from which there was no escape. Michael, though utterly devastated, understood. He saw the fear in her eyes, the genuine distress that racked her slender frame. He believed, with a desperate, aching hope, that she was doing it to protect him, to shield her family from her father's relentless wrath. He left, his heart ripped from his chest, his dreams shattered, but with a flicker of determination still burning within him. He would not be broken. He would make something of himself, not for Robert Sterling, but for himself, and for the memory of the love he had lost. He moved away from London, away from the constant reminders of Sarah and the shadow of her powerful father. He chose a different city, a new beginning, a place where he could try to rebuild his life, piece by agonizing piece. The pain of Sarah's absence was a constant companion, a dull ache that never truly subsided, but he channeled his grief and his anger into his work, determined to prove Robert Sterling wrong, to forge a future that was entirely his own. He vowed that one day he would be a man no one could ever dismiss or threaten again. This was the crucible in which Michael, the single dad, was forged. A past he had painstakingly buried, now threatening to erupt and consume his present. Michael, having left London and the crushing weight of his past behind, poured all his energy into rebuilding his life. The sting of Sarah's forced departure, the bitter taste of Robert Sterling's threats, fueled a quiet, relentless ambition within him. He dedicated himself to his career, meticulously honing his skills in accountancy. He wasn't chasing the kind of exorbitant wealth Robert Sterling commanded, but rather a solid, unshakable stability, a foundation no one could ever threaten to dismantle again. He became adept, respected in his field, carving out a modest but secure existence, far from the opulent world he had briefly touched. Years passed, marked by diligent work, quiet evenings, and a gradual, almost imperceptible healing of old wounds. The ache for Sarah never entirely vanished, but it softened into a melancholic memory, a wistful what if that he kept carefully tucked away. Then, one ordinary afternoon, a shocking call shattered the carefully constructed piece of his new life. It was Sarah. Her voice, though older and tinged with a weariness he hadn't heard before, was unmistakable. Michael's heart leaped into his throat, a mix of disbelief, hope, and a surge of old pain washing over him. She was pregnant, she told him, her voice barely a whisper, laced with both fear and a fragile hope. And it was his child. The news hit Michael with the force of a tidal wave. He was stunned, his mind racing to process the impossible. Sarah, pregnant, with his child. She explained, her words tumbling out in a rush, a story of quiet rebellion and desperate escape. After their heartbreaking separation, she had realized she couldn't truly live without him, that her father's toxic influence had poisoned her own happiness. She admitted she had tried to contact him earlier, immediately after breaking free from her father's suffocating control. But Robert Sterling, ever vigilant, had intercepted her messages, blocking every attempt she made to reach out. It had taken time, precious, agonizing time, to fully extricate herself from her father's grasp, to truly reclaim her own agency. She confessed her fear, her deep-seated apprehension that he might not want anything to do with her, after everything they had endured, after the way they had been torn apart. She was scared he would reject her, reject their child. But Michael, despite the initial shock, felt an overwhelming surge of emotions, not of anger or resentment, but of an almost primal protectiveness, an incandescent joy, his Sarah carrying their child. The past, the pain, the billionaire's threats, all faded into insignificance in the face of this profound, unexpected miracle. He embraced the idea of fatherhood instantly, wholeheartedly. He was thrilled, protective, determined. They talked for hours, reconnecting across the chasm of years, weaving dreams of a future together, a future they had once believed was irrevocably lost. They planned, with an almost childlike excitement, for the arrival of their child, for the family they would finally build, free from external pressures and powerful, disapproving fathers. Their happiness, however, was tragically short-lived. Just a few months before Lily was due to be born, a cruel twist of fate intervened. Sarah was involved in a horrific car accident. Michael received the call, a cold, impersonal voice delivering the news that ripped his world apart for a second, more devastating time. Sarah was gone. She died, taking with her not only Michael's renewed hope, his future, but also the vibrant life that was growing within her. Michael was utterly shattered. The love of his life, the woman he had finally found peace with, was gone, leaving him alone, utterly bereft and burdened with a secret that now felt heavier than ever. But through the crushing grief, a fierce, unwavering resolve began to form. He would raise their daughter, their Lily. He would honor Sarah's memory by being the best father he could possibly be. In the throes of his grief, Michael made a profound decision. He decided to keep Lily's true parentage a secret from her. He wanted to shield her from the painful truth of her mother's tragic death, from the knowledge of her powerful, disapproving grandfather, a man who had caused so much pain. He believed, with every fiber of his being, that this silence was an act of love, a way to protect her innocent heart from the complexities and cruelties of the past. He couldn't bear the thought of her growing up with the shadow of Robert Sterling's influence, or the knowledge of her mother's untimely end hanging over her. He packed up his life once more, seeking a fresh start, a sanctuary where he and Lily could begin anew. He chose a quiet suburb outside of London, a place far removed from the glitz and power of the city, a place where he hoped they could live anonymously, peacefully. He poured all his love, all his energy, all his shattered dreams into Lily. He became her rock, her confidant, her entire world. He made sure she had a happy childhood, brimming with laughter, stories, and unconditional love, despite the gaping absence of her mother. He never spoke ill of Sarah, always painting her in the most loving and gentle light, a beautiful star in the sky watching over them. He never mentioned her family, never uttered the name Robert Sterling. He was determined to be the best single dad he could be, a silent guardian of a past he hoped would never touch his daughter. He built a life for them, stable and loving, but founded on a secret that now, after Lily's innocent questions, threatened to unravel everything. The carefully constructed dam Michael had built around his past was now showing cracks, the pressure from Lily's innocent but persistent questions steadily eroding its foundations. Her inquiries about a real dad were no longer isolated incidents. They were escalating, becoming more frequent, more pointed, laden with an uncharacteristic sadness that tugged at Michael's heart. He knew, with a growing sense of dread, that he couldn't keep the truth from her much longer. The secret, once a shield, was now a barrier, separating him from his daughter. And he was terrified of the old wounds that would inevitably reopen, especially the thought of facing Robert Sterling again. The very name still sent a chill down his spine, a visceral reminder of power, manipulation, and heartbreak. As if fate itself was conspiring against his carefully guarded peace, Robert Sterling began to resurface in the news. Michael would catch glimpses of him on television, headlines screaming from newspaper stands, all centered around Sterling Enterprises. The reports painted a grim picture: a massive legal battle, accusations of shady business practices, environmental damage, and a tarnished public image. Each segment, each article, reinforced the image of Robert Sterling as a ruthless, cold man, exactly as Michael remembered him from their brief, brutal encounters. He watched, a knot forming in his stomach, as the billionaire's empire, once seemingly invincible, began to show signs of strain. One crisp autumn evening, Michael took Lily to their favorite local park, a small patch of green nestled between quiet suburban streets. Lily, usually full of boundless energy, was subdued, kicking at fallen leaves as they walked. Suddenly, a bright flash of lights and the unmistakable drone of a news van caught her attention. A local news crew was reporting live from outside a prominent building just a few blocks away, the Sterling Enterprises logo emblazoned on its facade. The reporter, looking stern, spoke into the microphone while a large image of Robert Sterling, grim-faced and unyielding, appeared on the screen behind her. Lily, with the uncanny perception of a child, pointed a small finger at the screen. "Daddy," she said, her voice small but clear, "that man looks a bit like me. He has the same nose." Michael's heart plummeted, a cold dread seizing him. He forced a strained smile. "Does he, sweetie? Lots of people have similar noses." He tried to distract her, pointing towards a squirrel scampering up a tree. But the seed of doubt had been planted, irrevocably, in Lily's young mind. Her gaze lingered on the screen for a moment longer, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes before she finally turned away. But Michael knew. He knew that moment, that innocent observation, was a turning point. The casual comment, the recognition of a shared feature, was a direct link to the past he had so desperately tried to erase. The incident at the park solidified a growing conviction within Michael. He couldn't hide any longer. He had to confront Robert Sterling, not just for Lily's sake, but for Sarah's memory, for the justice she had been denied. The billionaire's current legal woes, the public scrutiny, presented an unexpected window of opportunity. It was time to act. Michael, utilizing his sharp accounting skills and his meticulous eye for detail, began to discreetly gather information. He delved into public records, financial reports, and news archives, meticulously piecing together the intricate tapestry of Sterling Enterprises. He worked late into the nights after Lily was asleep, poring over documents, cross-referencing figures, and sifting through mountains of data. What he unearthed was disturbing, yet entirely unsurprising. He found inconsistencies, hidden accounts, and a complex web of shell corporations designed to obscure the very unethical practices Robert Sterling was now being accused of. The empire, he realized, was not just on shaky ground. It was built on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and ruthless disregard for ethical conduct, exactly mirroring the way Robert Sterling had manipulated Sarah and Michael all those years ago. The more he dug, the clearer it became. Robert Sterling was a man who saw people and principles as mere pawns in his relentless pursuit of power and wealth. And now, Michael had the evidence to prove it. He wasn't just armed with a desperate plea for justice. He was armed with facts, figures, and irrefutable proof. The game had changed. Michael, now armed with a meticulous dossier of Robert Sterling's illicit dealings, felt a surge of resolve, unlike anything he had experienced in years. The time for passive protection was over. It was time for decisive action. He realized he could not allow Robert Sterling's tarnished legacy to be the only narrative Lily would ever know about her mother's family, or worse, for that legacy to remain unchallenged while Sarah's memory languished in silence. He needed to ensure Lily understood the full, unvarnished truth, even if it was painful. This wasn't about vengeance, not entirely, but about justice, about an accurate accounting of the past, both financial and personal. He began to formulate a plan, leveraging his professional expertise to gain access. He knew a direct confrontation would be met with the usual dismissiveness and threats. He needed leverage, and he had found it in the labyrinthine financial records of Sterling Enterprises. Using his accounting acumen, Michael orchestrated a scenario that would grant him an audience with the elusive billionaire. He submitted a detailed, though carefully anonymized, report to Sterling Enterprises' audit department, highlighting a series of complex, overlooked financial irregularities that, he subtly implied, could have significant legal ramifications if not addressed immediately. It was a Trojan horse, a professional gambit designed to pique Robert Sterling's interest, a bait that spoke directly to the billionaire's primary concern, his money and his empire. The strategy worked. A few days later, Michael received a call from Sterling Enterprises, requesting a meeting with the anonymous consultant who had submitted the report. He agreed, carefully choosing a pseudonym and preparing himself mentally for the encounter. He walked into the opulent, intimidating lobby of Sterling Tower, a building that symbolized everything he despised about Robert Sterling, yet a building he now approached with a quiet, steely determination. The meeting took place in a lavish, impersonal boardroom. Robert Sterling, impeccably dressed and radiating an aura of cold authority, sat at the head of a long, polished table. He was older, certainly, his face etched with deeper lines of power, and perhaps stress from the ongoing legal battles. But his eyes still held that familiar, piercing intensity. He began the meeting with a condescending tone. barely glancing at Michael, assuming he was just another financial analyst seeking to impress. He dismissed Michael's initial, carefully worded points about the financial irregularities as minor oversights, attempting to assert his dominance. Michael, however, remained calm, allowing Sterling to speak, to underestimate him. He let the billionaire run through his practiced spiel of corporate might and legal invincibility. Then, at a calculated moment, Michael interrupted, his voice clear and steady. "Mr. Sterling," he began, "I believe we've met before, though I doubt you'd remember a young man you so easily dismissed." Robert Sterling paused, his expression hardening. He scrutinized Michael's face, a flicker of recognition, then disbelief, then rage beginning to dawn in his eyes. The color drained from his face as the pieces clicked into place. "You," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "Davies, what in God's name are you doing here?" The air in the room crackled with tension. The dismissive arrogance was instantly replaced by a venomous hostility. Robert Sterling leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. "I thought I made myself clear all those years ago. You were to disappear. You were to never darken my door again." Michael met his gaze, unflinching. "And I did disappear, Mr. Sterling, for a long time. But some things, like the truth, have a way of resurfacing." Robert Sterling's face contorted with fury. He immediately reverted to his old tactics, the tools of intimidation and bribery. "How much?" he snarled, his voice a low growl. "Is this what this is about? You want money? Another payout to disappear? To forget about Sarah? To forget about that child?" The casual dismissal of Lily as "that child" sent a fresh wave of cold anger through Michael, solidifying his resolve. "Name your price, Davies. A sum large enough to ensure you never speak her name, or Sarah's again. Enough to set you up for life, far away from here." He even went further, threatening to ruin Michael's life, his career, to make sure he would never work in accountancy again if he didn't comply. He painted a vivid picture of a future where Michael would be blacklisted, financially destitute, and utterly alone. But Michael was no longer the scared young man who had once buckled under the weight of those threats. He was a father, fighting for his daughter's truth, for Sarah's memory. He met Robert Sterling's gaze with unwavering intensity. "You misunderstand, Mr. Sterling," Michael said, his voice calm, cutting through the billionaire's bluster. "This isn't about money, and it's certainly not about disappearing." He then pushed a slim, leather-bound folder across the table towards Robert Sterling. "This," Michael continued, "is about accountability. This folder contains a meticulously documented account of every financial irregularity, every hidden account, every illicit transaction I've uncovered within Sterling Enterprises. Evidence, Mr. Sterling, that goes far beyond the current legal battles you're facing. Enough, I believe, to bring your entire empire crashing down around you. Enough to expose you as the ruthless, corrupt individual you truly are, not just to the media, but to every regulatory body in the country." Robert Sterling snatched the folder, his eyes darting over the first few pages, his expression shifting from fury to a dawning, chilling realization. He saw the precision, the undeniable evidence, the depth of Michael's investigation. He understood the gravity of what Michael held. The arrogance began to crack, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. "I'm not doing this for money," Michael reiterated, his voice steady. "I'm doing this for Sarah, for the justice she was denied, and for Lily, so she can know the truth about her mother and about her true lineage, free from the lies and manipulations you've built your life upon." He watched as the color drained from Robert Sterling's face, the billionaire's usual composure crumbling under the weight of the undeniable evidence and Michael's unwavering resolve. Robert Sterling, for the first time, looked truly shaken, trapped. Michael then laid out his clear, non-negotiable demand. "Here is what you will do, Mr. Sterling. You will publicly acknowledge Sarah as your daughter, and Lily as your granddaughter. You will offer a genuine public apology for your past actions, for the pain you caused, for the lives you destroyed. You will do this, or I will expose everything. The choice is yours, but understand this. I will not back down. Not this time." The words hung heavy in the air, a gauntlet thrown down, a challenge to a man who had never before been truly challenged. Robert Sterling's face, usually a mask of impenetrable authority, twisted into a furious snarl. He slammed the folder shut, the sharp sound echoing in the cavernous boardroom. "You are bluffing, Davies," he hissed, his voice laced with venom. "You think a few financial reports can bring down Sterling Enterprises? I have an army of lawyers. I will bury you in litigation. You will never work again. I will make sure of it." He rose from his chair, towering over Michael, attempting to intimidate him with his sheer physical presence and the weight of his power. But Michael remained seated, calm and unyielding. He had anticipated this reaction. He simply tapped the folder with a single finger. "These aren't just a few financial reports, Mr. Sterling. These are meticulously cross-referenced, independently corroborated documents detailing years of systematic fraud, tax evasion, and environmental breaches. I've highlighted the paper trails, the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the kind of evidence that leads to federal investigations, not just civil litigation. Your army of lawyers can only defend against what they know. They don't know the extent of this. Not yet." He then leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a calm, almost conversational tone that was far more chilling than any shout. "And as for burying me in litigation, you're already fighting for your corporate life. Do you really want to add a massive public scandal involving decades of financial malfeasance to your current woes? Because that is precisely what will happen if you refuse to cooperate. My goal isn't to destroy you financially, Mr. Sterling. My goal is justice for Sarah and truth for Lily. But I assure you, I am fully prepared to watch your empire crumble if that is the only path to achieving it." Robert Sterling's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something akin to genuine fear replacing the initial fury. He paced the room, his movements agitated, his carefully constructed composure finally cracking under the sustained pressure. He knew the precarious position Sterling Enterprises was in. The ongoing legal battles had already weakened his public image and drained considerable resources. This new, explosive information, presented with such meticulous detail by Michael, could indeed be the final nail in his corporate coffin. He was a man who understood leverage better than anyone, and he recognized it when it was being wielded against him with such devastating precision. "And who exactly is your anonymous contact in the press?" Robert Sterling sneered, attempting to regain some control, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Another one of your fantasies?" Michael offered a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "A reputable journalist, Mr. Sterling, with a track record of breaking high-profile corporate scandals. They are currently in possession of a secure, encrypted copy of all this information, with instructions to release it if I don't check in with them by a certain time. I assure you, they are very real and very eager to publish. They're just waiting for my signal." This was a bluff, of course, but a highly plausible one, given the current climate around Sterling Enterprises. The billionaire's face paled further, He was trapped, cornered by a man he had once dismissed as utterly insignificant. The tense standoff stretched on, minutes feeling like hours. Robert Sterling, the ruthless titan of industry, finally showed a flicker of vulnerability, a grudging acknowledgement of defeat. He sank back into his chair, running a hand over his face, looking suddenly older, wearier. The fight had drained him. "All right, Davies," he conceded, his voice raspy, laced with a bitter resentment. "What are your exact terms again?" Michael reiterated his demands, his voice clear and firm. "Public acknowledgement of Sarah Sterling as your daughter and Lily Davies as your granddaughter. A genuine, public apology for your past actions, specifically mentioning the pain caused to Sarah and her family, and an agreement to cease all attempts to interfere with Lily's life or her relationship with me." He knew the genuine part of the apology would be difficult for a man like Robert Sterling, but the public acknowledgement was paramount. "In return," Michael continued, "I will ensure this information about your financial dealings remains private. However, I will require a signed non-disclosure agreement from you regarding these financial details, specifically preventing you from ever attempting to retaliate against me using this information or any other means. My goal, as I said, is not to destroy you financially, but to ensure Lily's truth and my protection." Robert Sterling bristled at the non-disclosure clause, but after another moment of internal struggle, he reluctantly nodded. His empire was on the brink, and financial ruin was a far greater threat than a forced public appearance and a grudging apology. "Very well," he bit out, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "Prepare the statements. My legal team will review them." Within days, the machinery of Sterling Enterprises was mobilized, not for a corporate acquisition, but for a damage control operation of unprecedented scale. A press conference was hastily arranged, generating a flurry of speculation among the media. Rumors swirled, but no one anticipated the bombshell that was about to drop. The press conference took place in the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel, packed with journalists, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Robert Sterling, looking visibly uncomfortable and aged, stood at the podium. His usual commanding presence was replaced by a strained, almost fragile demeanor. He began with a carefully worded statement about navigating difficult personal matters. Then, his voice devoid of its usual booming confidence, he made the announcement. "Today," he began, his gaze fixed on the teleprompter, "I stand before you to address a deeply personal family matter that has remained private for far too long. I wish to publicly acknowledge my late daughter, Sarah Sterling, who tragically passed away several years ago, and, importantly, I wish to acknowledge her daughter, my granddaughter, Lily Davies." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The cameras flashed even more furiously. "Furthermore," he continued, his voice tightening, "I wish to express my sincere regret for certain past errors in judgment and personal failings that caused considerable pain and misunderstanding within my family. I am committed to rectifying these past wrongs and to building a relationship with my granddaughter Lily." It was a carefully crafted statement, avoiding explicit details of his past actions, but the admission, the public acknowledgement, was undeniable. The media was stunned. This was a massive story, connecting the reclusive billionaire to a previously unknown family, a secret daughter and a granddaughter. The implications were immense. Later that evening, Michael sat with Lily in their cozy living room, watching the news reports flood the airwaves. Lily, perched on the edge of the sofa, was confused but undeniably intrigued by seeing her grandfather, the man she'd only just learned about, on every single television channel. She pointed at the screen, her eyes wide. "Daddy, that's the man with the same nose as me. He's my grandpa?" Michael smiled, a profound sense of relief washing over him. "Yes, sweetie," he confirmed, pulling her closer. "That's your Grandpa Robert, and he just told the whole world that you're his granddaughter, and that your mommy was his daughter, Sarah." The truth, finally, was out. It was a complex, messy truth, but it was out. And for the first time in a long time, Michael felt a glimmer of hope that Lily's future would be built on honesty, not secrets. The first battle was won, but the journey towards healing had only just begun. After the press conference, the media frenzy surrounding Robert Sterling's unexpected announcement was immense. News channels ran endless segments dissecting the reclusive billionaire's sudden revelation of a secret daughter and granddaughter. Pundits speculated on the motives, the timing, and the potential impact on Sterling Enterprises. But for Michael, the public spectacle was merely a means to an end. The true work, the emotional reckoning, was yet to begin. A day later, Michael received a call from Robert Sterling. The billionaire's voice, though still gruff, lacked the venom and arrogance it had carried during their last face-to-face encounter. He proposed a meeting, not in the intimidating confines of Sterling Tower, but at a neutral location. A quiet, discreet private room in an upscale, old-world London hotel, far from the prying eyes of the press. Michael agreed, a sense of cautious anticipation settling over him. He wondered what further demands or manipulations Robert Sterling might attempt. He steeled himself for another confrontation, another battle of wills. When Michael arrived, Robert Sterling was already seated at a large, polished mahogany table, a single aged leather briefcase beside him. He looked different without the glare of the cameras and the pressure of a public performance. He appeared smaller, perhaps, less formidable, certainly more tired. The lines on his face seemed deeper, etched not just by age and stress, but perhaps by something else Michael hadn't seen before. A hint of vulnerability. He gestured towards the opposite chair, a silent invitation to sit. There was no pretense of civility, no small talk. The air was thick with unspoken history and unresolved pain. Robert Sterling cleared his throat, his gaze fixed on the table, avoiding Michael's eyes. He reached for the briefcase, unlatched it, and carefully retrieved a sealed, cream-colored envelope. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost hesitant. He slid the envelope across the table towards Michael. "This was from Sarah," Robert said, his voice a low, almost indistinguishable murmur. It was the first time Michael had heard him utter Sarah's name with anything other than derision or cold indifference. "She left it for you. Before Lily was born. I kept it." His voice trailed off, laden with an emotion Michael couldn't quite decipher. Michael's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the envelope. The paper felt thick, substantial, imbued with the ghost of Sarah's touch. His heart pounded in his chest, a mix of profound grief and overwhelming curiosity. He carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter, his eyes scanning Sarah's familiar, elegant handwriting. The words on the page were a torrent of emotions, a raw, heartfelt outpouring from the woman he had loved more than life itself. Sarah expressed her undying love for Michael, a love that time and her father's manipulations had never diminished. She wrote of her deep regret for giving in to her father's immense pressure, for believing, even for a moment, that pushing Michael away would protect him. She confessed the agony of their separation, the constant ache in her heart. She detailed the struggle to break free from her father's suffocating control, a battle she fought for months, slowly regaining her independence, piece by painful piece. Then her words shifted, filled with a radiant excitement about their child, their Lily. She spoke of her dreams for their family, her hopes for a future where they could all be together, free from the shadows of her past. But interwoven with this joy was a deeper, more poignant revelation about her father. Sarah, in her characteristic empathy, tried to explain, not excuse, his motivations. She revealed that Robert Sterling had a difficult past himself, losing his own beloved younger sister, tragically young in a senseless accident. This profound loss, she wrote, had twisted his love into an obsessive, controlling protectiveness, a desperate attempt to shield those he cared about from any perceived harm, even if it meant alienating them. He became a man consumed by the fear of loss, which manifested as an unyielding need for control. Sarah didn't condone his actions, but she offered a window into the deep-seated pain that drove them. The letter concluded with a plea, a final, poignant wish from Sarah. She asked Michael, if it were ever possible, to find a way to forgive her father, not for Robert's sake, but for Lily's. She expressed her hope that one day, Lily might know her grandfather, understand the complex, flawed man behind the facade, and perhaps, through forgiveness, heal some of the generational wounds that had plagued their family. It was a plea for healing, for connection, for a future where Lily would not be deprived of any part of her heritage, however complicated. Michael finished reading, tears blurring his vision. He gently refolded the letter, his mind reeling from the raw emotion and the astonishing insights Sarah had provided. He looked up at Robert Sterling, who had remained silent, watching him intently. Then, in a move that utterly stunned Michael, Robert Sterling began to speak, his voice uncharacteristically soft, almost fragile. After Sarah died, he began, his gaze finally meeting Michael's. I found that letter. I read it, and then I read it again, and again. He paused, a flicker of something akin to shame crossing his face. I felt immense guilt, a guilt I had never truly allowed myself to feel before. It was like she was speaking to me from beyond the grave, telling me everything I had done wrong, everything I had lost. He took a deep, shuddering breath. She was right, about my sister, about everything. I was so afraid of losing Sarah, I pushed her away. I pushed you both away. He looked at Michael, and for the first time, Michael saw a flicker of genuine remorse in the billionaire's eyes, a genuine pain that transcended his usual arrogance. I was wrong, Michael, terribly wrong, to separate you, to keep this from you. He gestured vaguely at the letter, to try and erase you both from her life. Robert Sterling then leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. She loved you very much, Michael, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I see why now. She saw something in you, something I was too blind, too proud, too afraid to see. It was a confession, an admission of profound misjudgment, from a man who rarely, if ever, admitted fault. He then presented a new offer, not a bribe, but a genuine attempt at reconciliation and provision. I want to establish a trust fund for Lily, he stated, his voice regaining a touch of its former resolve, but tempered with a newfound humility. Not as a payment, not to buy my way into her life, but as a grandfather's provision, a way to ensure her future, her education, her security. Whatever you and she decide is best. He paused, then added, and I would like to be a part of her life, Michael, if you would allow it. Not to replace you, never that, but simply to know my granddaughter, to try and make amends for the past in some small way. Michael was overwhelmed. The letter, Sarah's profound understanding of her father, and now Robert Sterling's unexpected vulnerability and genuine offer of reconciliation all converged into a tidal wave of emotion. He realized that Sarah's final wish, dictated from beyond the grave, was not for revenge or continued animosity, but for healing, for forgiveness, for the possibility of a complete, if complicated, family for their daughter. The justice he had sought was now entwined with a deeper, more profound opportunity for reconciliation. A few months passed, bringing with them a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the lives of Michael, Lily, and even Robert Sterling. The initial shock of the press conference had faded, replaced by a new tentative rhythm. Lily, once plagued by questions about her real dad, was now much happier, more secure in her identity. Her questions still came, but they were different now, filled with a childlike curiosity about her Grandpa Robert and her mommy Sarah, whose story Michael had finally begun to unveil. Michael had embraced the task of introducing Lily to her mother's memory. He spent hours with her, poring over old photographs, pointing out Sarah's bright smile, her sparkling eyes, the way she held herself with an elegant grace. He shared anecdotes, stories of Sarah's kindness, her laughter, her dreams. He spoke of Sarah's love for art, her passion for helping others, her unwavering spirit. Lily listened intently, her small face alight with wonder, slowly piecing together the image of the mother she had never known. Michael felt a profound sense of peace as he watched Lily connect with Sarah, knowing that he was finally fulfilling Sarah's deepest wish for their daughter to know her truth. The relationship with Robert Sterling was, understandably, still new and a bit awkward. A delicate dance between two men bound by a shared loss and a mutual love for Lily, yet separated by years of animosity and vastly different worlds. Robert Sterling wasn't a completely changed man overnight. The ingrained habits of a lifetime of ruthless business and emotional guardedness were not easily shed, but he was, undeniably, making an effort. His visits to Lily began tentatively, supervised by Michael at first. There were no grand, extravagant gestures, no attempts to buy Lily's affection with ostentatious gifts. Instead, he brought thoughtful presents, a beautifully illustrated children's book about London, a miniature telescope, after Lily expressed an interest in stars, a small, intricate model of an old-fashioned train. He seemed to genuinely try to connect with her, asking about her school, her drawings, her latest adventures. He would listen, sometimes patiently, sometimes with a slight, uncharacteristic frown of concentration, as he tried to decipher a child's logic. Michael observed these interactions with a quiet intensity, a part of him still wary, but another part acknowledging the genuine, if clumsy, attempts at grandfatherly affection. Their truce, Michael realized, was a fragile thing, built on the bedrock of Sarah's memory and their shared devotion to Lily. They were learning to navigate their complicated family dynamic, a mosaic pieced together from fractured pasts and hopeful futures. Conversations between Michael and Robert were still often terse, focused on logistics or Lily's well-being, but occasionally a flicker of something deeper would pass between them. A shared glance of understanding, a subtle nod of acknowledgement that transcended their personal history. Michael often reflected on Sarah's letter, its wisdom echoing in his mind. He had sought justice, yes, and in a way, he had achieved it. Robert Sterling had been publicly humbled, forced to confront his past. But Sarah's letter had led to something far more profound: reconciliation. It had opened a door, not just for Lily to know her grandfather, but for Robert Sterling himself to begin a journey of atonement, and for Michael to finally lay to rest years of bitterness. He understood now that true healing wasn't about vengeance, but about finding a path forward, even with those who had caused immense pain. It was about creating a complete family for Lily, however unconventional it might be. One sunny afternoon, Michael sat in the living room, a rare moment of quiet contemplation, watching Lily and Robert Sterling interact. Lily was sprawled on the floor, surrounded by a riot of crayons and paper, utterly absorbed in her artistic endeavors. Robert Sterling, uncharacteristically, was kneeling beside her, his usually stern face softened by a slight smile as he watched her. He wasn't offering advice or criticism, just observing, a silent, attentive presence. Lily, with the boundless enthusiasm of a child, suddenly held up a colorful drawing. "Look, Grandpa Robert! Look, Daddy!" she exclaimed, her voice bubbling with pride. Michael walked over, a gentle smile on his face. The drawing was a vibrant, childlike depiction of a family. In the center, there was a stick figure, with a kind smile, clearly Michael. Beside him, a smaller, equally cheerful figure, undoubtedly Lily, her hair a wild tangle of scribbled yellow. And next to her, another slightly larger stick figure, with a somewhat lopsided smile and a surprisingly accurate depiction of Robert Sterling's distinctive nose. "That's you, Daddy," Lily pointed excitedly. "And that's me, and that's Grandpa Robert." Michael's heart swelled with an indescribable warmth. He looked at Robert Sterling, who met his gaze, a rare, genuine smile gracing his lips. There was no awkwardness in this moment, just a shared joy in Lily's innocent creation. Then Lily, with a flourish, added one more detail to her drawing. Above the three figures, she carefully drew another smiling face, surrounded by a halo of golden yellow, her eyes bright with understanding. "And that's Mommy Sarah," she announced, her voice soft but certain. "She's always watching over us." Michael felt a tear trace a path down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Robert Sterling, too, looked at the drawing, his expression unreadable for a moment, before a profound sadness, mixed with something akin to peace, settled on his face. Michael smiled, a deep, abiding sense of peace finally settling over him. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he had done the right thing. Not just for Lily, ensuring she knew her true lineage and had a chance at a fuller family, but also for Sarah's legacy. The billionaire had indeed been shattered, his carefully constructed world irrevocably altered. But from the scattered pieces, a new, complex, and unexpectedly hopeful family was slowly, beautifully, starting to form. The future remained unwritten, but for the first time in a very long time, it felt bright, filled with the promise of healing and love.